Today, we're going to talk about turning a no into a yes, or at least opportunity, because you never know what can happen. But we have to lean into that no to find out. So, first thing I want to share is I've had this happen a number of times in my career. I'm not sure if it was because I have had an amazing dad that taught me how to ask for what you want and don't take no for an answer. Obviously, you want to push back with grace. And that's really the focus of today is going to be about how do you build relationships and collaborate even when there's a no for possibility beyond what the person initially thought, or maybe even what you initially thought, and turn that into opportunity. So I have a number of stories of when this happened in my life, but I want to share one that was very recent because it's top of mind. And the first thing is I was invited. So think about, for example, in your life, where is a time where you got a no and you just said, okay, and then you moved on? So some of you have heard, I'm actually going to give you two stories. So the first no that I got that was very devastating to me, which was a few years ago when I applied to be a speaker for TEDx Minneapolis. Although I live in the Bay Area, I am originally from Minneapolis, so I was very excited about this possibility, thinking, oh my gosh, like even when I opened up the application, I felt all this emotion and I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Maybe this is the time. And I even got a call back. Had an amazing interview. The woman and I, Megan, had a great conversation. We had a lot of things in common as far as the connection goes because she used to live near my house where I grew up as a kid. She actually used to deliver my mom's paper. So we had all of this great connection. And she said, well, we've chosen out of 17, you are one of 17 that we have selected for the first round. And my job is to basically share your expertise and your idea in front of the committee next week. And then we will choose six of you to be on the TEDx stage in Minneapolis. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we had this great relationship. This is going to happen. And she said, I'm crossing my fingers. And then that following Sunday, I got the dreaded email that I didn't make it. And I'm not going to lie, I was very sad most of the day. Definitely did a lot of grieving that day. But then it occurred to me that evening, you know what? I'm going to be in Minneapolis this week. Why don't I reach out to her and ask her if she want to have coffee? So I did. We had coffee. We had a great time. And I said, although this is really swallowing my pride, I want you to know that I am there for you and happy to come back into town and volunteer the day of the event. Even though that might be challenging for me, I would like to do that. And she said, well, come to think about it, with your experience, you would actually be a great speaker coach, but I can't make that decision. Let me check with the head speaker coach, at least introduce the two of you. So I was introduced, jumped through a number of hoops to be able to show that I was qualified for this, and I got the role. And it was exhilarating, and it still is exhilarating. I've been doing it now for 3 years. But here's the kicker. That was wonderful already. And notice there immediately that turned a no into a semi yes, just a different yes, but it actually was an even better fit for me. But the best fit of all, which was also the most unexpected thing of all, is that the team nominated me to be the MC of the TEDx event. So there I was on stage with my wonderful co-MC, Paulette, on stage in in August in 2023. And honestly, if I think back to that, that actually was a much better role for me. And I had a blast. It was also one of the most professionally challenging things in my life because of the fact that I was co-MCing. And there's so many dynamics that go along with that, not to mention an entire production crew that needs to know what you're going to say. And so it was that balance of how do I stay unscripted and yet scripted so that other people knew when they were to come in, or Paulette in particular. But I digress. That was an example that's one of my favorites where you never know what can happen. And sometimes you have to be a little creative, especially if you really want something. I just knew in my gut that she and I had a great connection, and that's why I reached out. It was not to get something, it was not manipulative. It was not self-serving. It was simply, gosh, I would love to connect and connect further. So this is where relationships are so key. Now, I do have three specific tips for you today, but I want to first share this other story, and then I'll walk through these tips. So the most recent example is when I was recently referred to be a speaker for an event. I applied, I got a call back, but the callback was a disappointment. She said, "We already have a keynote speaker." And here's the part that wasn't a disappointment. It was very nice of her to say, "We actually think that you're too high level to be in a breakout group room. And so would you consider applying next year?" So I said, "Of course, I would love that," and had a great exchange with her by email. I kept thinking about it though, thinking I really want to get to this event and somehow show up there. So I reached out and asked if she would be willing to have a conversation, and that I had said, "I have some ideas for your event," which I did. I wasn't exactly sure how the conversation was going to go, but I started in my mind, my first question was going to be, "Do you still have a breakout group available?" Because I would be happy to do a breakout group. And in my mind, I was thinking that would be really a good way for me to get to know the people there. So I didn't lead with that though. We just started having a great conversation, getting to know each other. And then I said, "So tell me more about your conference. I'm thinking about coming anyway, would love to know more about it." She started sharing more. Then that gave me more ideas of what I could share back potentially to offer. And then I said, "Would it be possible for me to have a booth there with my books?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, that would be awesome." And then I started sharing that when I typically have a booth at a trade show, I have a big sticker on the floor that says "Step into the spotlight." People can spin a wheel and get a topic to record themselves on, like something fun, like your last vacation or your first concert ever. And I take their phones, I have them present for 30 seconds, and then I give them feedback on their presentation style. And she was so excited about that. Said, "Oh my gosh, that would be amazing." And then one thing led to another, and I suggested that perhaps if it would serve the audience, that I could, based on some other things I've done at other conferences, I could come up to the stage and do an exercise with the women. And the more we talked and collaborated and built our relationship just simply naturally, the more it was so awesome to see where it panned out. So the jury's still out on exactly what's going to happen, but I'm quite confident I'm going to be at that conference, and it's going to be a blast. And more importantly, throughout the conversation, she started thinking about, "Oh my gosh, well, this would just be great for you to be there so that then we can be positioning you for next year's keynote." And it all sounded so great. And imagine if I had simply just accepted her no and went, "Okay, I'll just apply next year." So many times I see women taking a no as final. And we need to lean into the no's sometimes to see where there might be opportunity that we can uncover. So, the first of the three tips I want to give you is listen first to understand the no. First thing, the question I would suggest you ask is, what are your biggest concerns? And maybe this is something now thinking more of a business deal or a promotion. Ask what are your concerns, or what is it most that you what brought you to this answer, something like that. Now, what I would recommend is that you show genuine curiosity about their perspective. Ask questions, listen without interrupting, obviously, and validate their concerns so you can build trust. Find out, just get curious. And one of the things that resonates a lot for people, and I totally mean this sincerely when I say it, which is, how can I best be of service to you? What could I do, or what could I bring that would be helpful? Here are some ways, like with the speaker, the potential speaking engagement, I offered other ways that I have helped conferences in the past, not just being on stage, but or for the whole keynote, but there are other creative ways that we can collaborate and make this an amazing event. This same thing happened when I was considered for another speaking engagement. At the beginning of the call, they asked me right away, "What is your fee?" And I said, "Well, I'm happy to get to that. But before we do that, can I first find out what you most are looking for? What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is the goal of your event? And then the more we talked, by midway into that conversation, we were collaborating on what speakers to choose and how much each one should be divvied up as far as the payment goes. It was so fascinating. And that was a huge lesson for me because then by the end, I said, well, this is my rate and let's see what we can make work. So it's really interesting when the thing that I keep learning is the power of relationships time and time again. And ever since I was a kid, I've loved connecting with people. My mom used to laugh because when I was in, well, she used to, I think, sometimes roll her eyes in frustration because I would come home every day from school and say, Mom, can someone come over or so and so come over? Or can I go over to so and so's house? Because I was always so incredibly social. And I simply love people and love connecting with them. So that would be the first thing. Understand the no, understand the concerns, and then that can help you to respond in ways that you can find synergies that you might not have thought otherwise were there. The second one is to reframe as collaboration. So shift the conversation from your request to a shared solution. So we've kind of been talking about this already, but think about this as how can we make this work together as opposed to why aren't you giving me what you want or what I want? Think about it from that perspective. What questions could you keep asking? And then the third one is to offer flexible paths forward. So instead of pushing for one outcome, propose other options or maybe smaller steps to say, well, what if we tried this for 2 weeks? So let's say you are wanting to propose a new role in the company that you're in. That would be a great opportunity if they're hesitant to say, hey, let's just try this for 2 weeks, see what happens, or a month, or something like that. You give it an experimental trial. And if you're open to that, then they might be. So you never know. And this, what it does is it shows respect for their needs while keeping the door open to a potential agreement that may come later. So that's another thing to remember. Timing is everything. Sometimes a no doesn't mean a final no, it just means not yet. So you never know. And this is also why it's so important to keep up relationships. This is something that I continue to learn in my professional world where I've thought, oh gosh, I thought I maybe missed an opportunity. And then a year or two down the line, I get a call that says, hey, do you still do XYZ? And I think, oh my gosh, you never know what's going to happen. And so many of us, and I would continue to encourage you to plant seeds so that those seeds are out there. And then the things that harvest and sprout up might be in a completely different place. And it might even be better than you thought it ever could have been. And this is another example where years ago, when I was working for a company, I created 3 different roles for myself over the years. And one of the times I remember I was struggling with what I really wanted to do there. And as I was growing with the company, I was challenged a little bit. And you know what's funny is that I had had a number of conversations with the main, like my boss mainly, and the another C-suite person, but talking about exploring ways that I could showcase more of my expertise and help the organization. And I will never forget, in the middle of the night, I woke up in a hotel room to go to the bathroom, and the title just came to me. And I proposed that new title, and they loved it and said yes. And then we talked more about really frankly, a title that better represented what was already doing with the company. So there are lots of opportunities if we can think creatively and take the time to think creatively. So again, let's review here. Number one, listen first so you can understand the no and ask what concerns they have. Number two, reframe this as collaboration. Shift that conversation from your request to a shared solution and brainstorming. And that's another thing that you could say. What if we just brainstormed for 5 minutes about this? Let's see if we can come up with something creative that neither of us might have thought in the beginning. And then number three, offer flexible paths forward. So thinking about what are some things that you could try and experiment with. So, this is what I would suggest that you try. Start reframing your brain and think about the possibilities that exist all around you, but you might not have thought about it. So often, women take what they get and then move on, or they just go with the status quo. But we've got to start looking beyond the menu. And one of my favorite quotes is every wall is a door. Remember that. You never know if a wall might actually be a door where you can create an opportunity that nobody before you saw was possible. As a reminder, I have got some great services, two in particular. One, I do speaking engagements primarily for women's conferences. So if you know any event planner, or you know, or maybe you are an executive leader who wants to bring me to your team to help some of the communication elevate through presence in your delivery as well as the content so you can become even more memorable. I'm also launching the Powerhouse Leadership Lab, which is going to, I've been taking a break from that, but that is going to be launching in the new year 2026. And that is all to help women lead with power and presence, to communicate with confidence, ask for what you want, and lead without limits. Looking forward to seeing you next time. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.